My apologies for the tardiness. My session was supposed to start at 5:15 or 5:16. It just so happens that fortunately our courts are working till 5:30 in the evening. So you're seeing me in the proper avatar of a lawyer. So my apologies if it doesn't befit the dress code for the event. I've been asked to speak on, rather I've chosen the topic, unlocking the innovation potential of Bharat. I'm playing to my strengths here. I'm told I have just about 12 to 15 minutes, so I'll try to keep this as rapid fire as possible. So for the past 16 years or so, I have spent the better part of my commercial practice practicing intellectual property law. Fair disclosure, I'm seen as the black horse or the war horse for Indian generic pharmaceutical industry. So there's a decent chance that the bias shows as part of my engagement here. I will try and draw attention of this audience to three parts of India's IP landscape today, which I think should give you some idea as to where we are headed as an innovation economy. When I entered the profession in 2009, by and large, most Indian companies were seen as counterfeiters with very little value addition in terms of intellectual property. In 2025, I dare say this with a certain degree of experience and responsibility, that no more can you call Indian companies, especially in the pharmaceutical space and the electronic space and the mobile telecom space, as counterfeiters, because the kind of value addition that they have brought to the table has been tremendous. I will draw from my experience to present a few points, a few data points for this audience to connect the dots. Over the last 16 years, I have represented from NATCO, Dr. Reddy's, Emerson Laboratories, and a host of other companies from Gujarat and Bombay and Hyderabad, which are seen as the epicenters for India's pharmaceutical innovation. There was a time when Indian courts themselves were seriously suspect with respect to the reputation of Indian pharmaceutical industry, without realizing that the rest of the world has tremendous respect for our pharmaceutical industry, because we are seen as the pharmacy of the world for a very good reason. Particularly when it comes to HIV cocktails, cheap medicines, and by cheap I don't mean in terms of quality, affordable healthcare with respect to vaccines and so on and so forth. You've done a fantastic job. The only difference is Indian pharmaceutical industry has not moved fully beyond the generic space and it has not entered the innovator space. And that's been the common gripe or the common allegation that people have leveled against the industry. I've had an opportunity to actually survey the data on this point. Let me just present a few statistics for you to consider. And just so that I don't get it wrong, I have it in one place. These are the numbers for you to consider. Since 2017 until December 2024, the latest figures are, our exports in terms of drugs and pharmaceuticals to the rest of the world is to the tune of $21.7 billion. And that's not a small figure. And this figure has consistently hovered around the $20 billion figure for the last decade or so. And this tells us that while we may look down upon our generic industry as those who are not capable of producing blockbuster molecules or pioneering drugs, the rest of the world sees a certain degree of value in our ability to bring down the price drastically with respect to the very same product. So I recently represented one Indian company with respect to a product called Risdiplam, which is used for spinal muscular atrophy, which is usually a condition that afflicts children between the age of 3 and 5. Put yourself in the shoes of a parent whose child is suffering from SMA, which cannot afford the original drug manufacturer's product because each dosage costs you nothing less than $500,000 a month. And then you'll realize the value of the generic space, because that figure is not halved, it's not quartered, it comes down to a fraction of it when an Indian company steps into the picture, because we have cracked the code of manufacturing something at an affordable price which the rest of the world can actually consume. Until 2005, we took a decision as a country not to offer product patents when it comes to pharmaceutical substances, because that would mean higher costs, serious impact on public health, whatnot. 2005, when we decided to introduce the product patent regime for pharmaceutical substances, that was for the first time, I think, India's flex moment arrived on the global stage, because we got calls from South Africa, typically the BRICS countries, the global south, so to speak, saying, if India chooses to introduce product patents for pharmaceutical substances, we will not be in a position to meet our public health requirements. The globe's dependence, especially the global south's dependence on India's ability to produce affordable healthcare, was put on global stage for everybody to consume for the very first time. Without batting for any particular dispensation, despite my popular perception, as a state, as a country, there has been a certain degree of policy continuity as far as India is concerned to protect our national interest, particularly in the realm of public health. And most people don't realize it. Despite being a low-middle income economy, so to speak, in terms of pure GDP numbers, our investment in the pharmaceutical space and R&D is rarely given the credit it is due for. I'll give you the numbers for you to consider. In terms of just R&D spend, India spends approximately 1.72% of its investments in terms of GDP when it comes to R&D, specifically in pharmaceutical industry. Compare that with United States, which spends about 1.6%. Compare that with Europe, not Europe for that matter, Switzerland 3.4%, United Kingdom 0.36%. So I do believe that while there is a certain case to be made for the government's greater investment in R&D, the fact of the matter is our private sector too has to step up. Here, I think perhaps I may be presenting a bit of a stereotype, but it appears that the Indian entrepreneur still operates like an Indian trader, not an entrepreneur, because he likes liquidity in his account. And which means the more you're attached to liquidity in your bank account, your ability to invest and to take risks when it comes to innovation comes down significantly. And this is one attitudinal change which I don't think has come from within. And I have realized that there's a good reason why I will continue to support hardcore pharmaceutical litigation in courts, because that litigation is pushing Indian generic industry to look towards the direction of innovation. When they realize that there is a possibility of someone securing an injunction against them, and there could be a possibility of their entire product line coming to a grinding halt, then they start realizing that they can't keep playing the generic game for long. And therefore, over the years, I've seen Indian generic companies moving towards first the licensing model with the innovators, and from there they've started looking at reverse engineering, and they've understood how to crack the code of coming out with an inventive molecule. But please realize that coming out with a molecule in the pharmaceutical space is no joke. Going by a study of perhaps 2009 or 10 of the Tufts University, it takes close to $800 million to $1 billion for you to get a successful drug candidate after all the clinical trials are done. So the question that perhaps you may want to ask is, which Indian company has the heft or the appetite for risk to invest $800 million to come out with a possible successful drug candidate with an impact? I'll just take you to another issue which I think rarely gets any kind of attention. At this point, the pharmaceutical space, whether it's global or Indian, is catering to what I would call luxury health diseases. It's catering to the conditions of the rich. But living in the tropics, you have certain tropical conditions and certain health conditions which are associated exclusively to the subcontinent. There is practically no investment. The foreigner has no incentive to invest in this because he is catering to a global market. The Indian companies don't have the ability or the interest or the incentive to do so because the cost to benefit ratio, according to me, is a bit too low. Perhaps we need to take a look at how pharmaceutical industry has benefited from significant government push from behind the scenes and from the front stage in United Kingdom. I'm not looking at United States at all because there's no point comparing yourself with the United States of America. It's a country with 3 times your size, with 1/3 the population, with an economy that you can only aspire for to reach maybe in 20 or 30 years, not before that. So the countries that I look forward to in terms of comparables are smaller countries, a South Korea, a Germany, an Israel, a Switzerland. So these are the companies, or these are the countries that I look at, and I realize even in those countries, the government has invested upwards of 2.5%. So maybe that's one space, and that's one thing for the policymakers to consider. Moving away from the pharmaceutical space, I just wanted to focus on another aspect of soft IP which rarely gets attention in India. When world trade negotiations were happening with respect to TRIPS or GATT and so on and so forth, most of the European countries were not fighting on hard technology. They were fighting for champagne, whiskey, cheese, because that brings in a lot of money because of the branding behind it. And this takes you to one specific form of intellectual property that goes by the name geographical indications, like Basmati, Kanchipuram sari, so on and so forth. India has ramped up and has pulled its socks together for the purposes of filing and securing a right, but creation of the right is only 50% of the battle. The rest of the 50% is creating a brand out of a right. So brand protection, brand promotion is a very different ballgame altogether. And it is sad that a civilization that has mastered the art of ancient storytelling doesn't know how to tell a story with respect to its own brands and products. So maybe that is something that we may want to consider, because whenever we think of IP, we think of either the manufacturing space or the telecom space, or let's say the hard sciences or the basic research. But there is an entirely different economy altogether which has been untapped, which is the branding space from a GI perspective. And in my view, in my limited submission based on whatever I've seen so far, the more local you go, the more global you get, because you are exotic for them. You can blame this on Orientalism, but as long as it gets the money, I don't care. So if you invest significantly in this and you actually ramp up your branding activity, both in terms of creation of IP rights as well as promotion of that particular product as a brand, go to any Swiss city, town, village, or even in Japan for that matter, entire villages run on one industry. It could be chocolates, it could be cakes, it could be wine, it could be whiskey, it could be sake. I'm a teetotaler, I don't know beyond this. But the fact of the matter is, each of these brands have contributed to a significant amount of revenue inside the country. So I am trying to present two different, let's say, views altogether. One is with respect to investment in the hard sciences, and one is with respect to the investment on the culture side of it as well. In my view, this is the lower hanging fruit. It's easy to address. And we are very good at branding otherwise. At least I would say so since 2014, people may like it or not. If India has become a brand, I say this often, in Europe, at least until 2014, there were only 3 things the Europeans knew us for: Taj Mahal, Basmati rice, and Aishwarya Rai. Basmati is that popular. Basmati is really that popular. But it's unfortunate that we've managed to create a brand only out of Basmati, when practically every state and district of this country has a lot more to offer. With GI comes the second related benefit, which is GI-related tourism. A lot of people go to breweries. They get to see how Scotch whiskey is made. They buy tweed jackets. There's a good reason why they buy tweed jackets, because that also has a specific GI. Kanchipuram sari has a GI. How many people know about the Kanchipuram industry and have actually gone to guided tours into these manufacturing spots? So there is a cultural aspect which generates tangible revenue, both in terms of sales of product, creation of soft power, and also a boost to the tourism industry. These are just pointers for you to mull over. Beyond this, I don't wish to submit because I'm not charging here. My meter is not running here. Thank you.